Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Esop Sofa. I'm Darren Smith of Global Shares, and I'm delighted with the opportunity to host the virtual Esop Sofa. So much has changed since the last one in April. Who would have thought I'd be the expert on the hottest topic of 2021 in the industry? So if you do have any questions on Love Island, just do ask, and I'm happy to answer any questions on Milliam. But let's move mad on to the sponsors. I need to give an enormous thank you to these guys. Without it, we just couldn't do these events. It's great that we get great sponsorship, and also to all the ESOP members for your generous support, and for all you guys joining today and watching. Got an amazing panel, which I'll introduce shortly. But a big thanks to Juliet and Peter behind the scenes, who I'm not very technical, so I can't do all that kind of stuff. They're going to sort me out and be able to move these slides on and make sure everything runs smoothly, fingers crossed. So how's it work? So today's panel, we'll be discussing hot topics from the newspad of the last 5 months for about 25 minutes, and then we're going to ask audience questions as well. So please do use the question facility. Much better when you guys get involved as well. It's just at the top right-hand side of your screens. So just to let you know how it works, basically any easy questions that come through I'll answer, and any other tough ones I'll send on to this amazing panel. Anyone who wants to watch my dad jokes back and the amazing panel, it is recorded and it'll be available in 2 days. So right then, should we have a chat with the this exclusive belter of a panel? First up, we have our own legal beagle, law expert Sonia Gilbert of Clifford Chance. What Sonia doesn't know about law is quite frankly illegal. Then we have the amazing tax expert Arran Simpson of Deloitte. Tax to Arran is like unicorns to my 5-year-old daughter Autumn. He just loves tax. And finally, what panel will be complete without our amazing Julie Shepherd of Sage, or as she's known to her friends, Jules. As you can imagine, she's asked me to call her Julie. No, only joking, Jules. Welcome to the tea. Welcome to the panel, everyone. You're getting a standing ovation from the virtual home. I can see them all now. Don't panic, everyone. I can't really see you. So hot topics then. Let's address the elephant in the room. Since our last sofa, YBS have sadly withdrawn from the share plan market. First of all, I'd like to say a huge thank you to the Share Plans family who supported me and my colleagues with job offers who were at risk. And, that's not just providers like Global Shares, obviously, which I'm forever grateful for, but also advisors, issuers. Everyone really came through and wanted to support the team, which is just brilliant to see. It just shows you what a great industry we are. What does YBS withdrawing from the market mean? So to the clients, there's no new share save plans being offered, but the historical grants will still run to maturity, and there's still an amazing team there that can manage that, so there's no need to panic. SIP plans outside of the minimum term contracts will need to switch to a new provider, and again, the ones that are in minimum term contracts will be continued to be managed by a great team at YBS. The big 2 questions I keep getting asked is why, and why didn't they sell the back book to another provider? So just to give you an idea, Share Plans was a team of 51 in a company with 3,500 employees. We just work core to the business, if I'm being honest. So mortgage and savings got the development, and then Share Plans were the last to the table. It just wasn't core. In years gone by, when you went to do a pitch, it used to be 50 minutes of Darren and Louise giving jazz hands and how amazing we'd ease the burden, service we could give, and the comms, etc. And then 10 minutes at the end was on the demo of the tech. That's changed in recent years, and that was to COSEC and HR. That's changed in the last couple of years to 50 minutes demo and 10 minutes pricing with the procurement team leading it. And we just couldn't keep up with that tech. It became increasingly apparent that questions were single sign-on, one portal, global call centres, nominee service, and not forgetting an app, which I think YBS said on the roadmap for the year 3000 or something like that. So, we just couldn't compete anymore with the demo. So that's the main reason why we had to pull out of the market. We couldn't sell the back book easily without getting member approval as well. And members to YBS are their customers. So like my grandma who's got £100 in her Access Saver. So it seemed an impossible task to be able to do that. But I'll be forever grateful for YBS. They've been a superb employer and I loved every minute. But enough from me. Sonia, from a legal perspective, what have you seen as a result of YBS pulling out of the market?
Well, it may not be a strictly legal answer here, Darren, but I think just really a lot of disappointment. I mean, certainly, we as a team I've always loved working with YBS, still working with the team there at the moment, and had a great experience. And I think then for a lot of our clients, companies who've had YBS as a provider and known what great customer service they've had, just real disappointment. So it's much more about, I think, the loss of a fantastic player in the market, which is always sad, and a lot less to do with the kind of strict legal side of things, if I'm honest, Arran. But it's a good opportunity, I guess, for people to be looking around the market again now and thinking, who's a good fit for me in terms of a provider?
No, definitely no. Thanks for that. I must admit, I was devastated. I've been there half my life as well, and the YBS did always get great feedback on that customer service. So no, that's great to hear. And then Arran, from the world of tax, did you have a different story there?
No, very much the same story, to be honest. We're all gutted to hear the news. It came as a bit of a shock to a lot of us. Worked with YBS for many years, a number of my clients are with YBS. And I think for me in particular, YBS were always very good with the smaller clients where the volumes were a little bit smaller. The pricing was quite effective with YBS, perhaps more so than some of the other providers would be at that particular end of the market. So I think it was certainly a shock to the market, and I'm very sorry to see YBS withdraw. But things change, we all move on, and creates opportunities, I guess, for others.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you, Arran. And then Jules, from an issuer point of view, what are your thoughts and your fellow issuers' thoughts?
Well, I guess sort of issuers, companies that with YBS, there's because of the way that this has happened, there's no sale of the business as such. It's a wind down. There's obviously a mad panic now to find a new provider to take them on for their next launches, which is obviously quite always quite stressful for issuers to be sort of like forced into that position. I guess for me, I'm always sad to see a provider go. There aren't many providers. It's quite niche. It's very technical what we do. And there's a limited number of providers that we can go to. So to lose one for me means that it always brings into call that competitive angle and being able to get the best service, the best deal, that push, that drive to be ever, from the provider's perspective, to look for more cutting edge technology to keep ahead and give us new services and new support. So I see it as a loss from that perspective. I hope it doesn't continue. I wouldn't like to see us get into a position where, as we have kind of sort of on the registry side, where you only have 2 or 3 providers to choose from. I think it's always good to have that competitive angle and competitive drive.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point, Jules, and hopefully the fact that a lot of the YBS people are going to all these different providers and advisors, we can keep seeing improvements in the industry as well. But no, really valid points from all of you there. In the latest newspad, let's move on from YBS now. In the latest newspad, it led with private equity putting more share schemes under siege. It discussed a possible takeover of Morrison's by Fortress Investments, and I've definitely seen a number of clients over the past year be purchased by private equity firms, resulting in an ending of their share plans. We definitely see that at YBS, albeit with some nice capital gains for those involved. What's your take on this, Arran?
I think it's a really interesting one because I sort of work across sector. So I do a lot of work with listed clients, but I do a lot of work with large private clients as well. So I get involved with some of these transactions. I think the first thing to say is they are very complex transactions to get involved with. The implications for the share plans and working through what it means in practice is very involved. It's clearly a very emotive area for those people who are personally impacted by it. It affects a large part of the workforce. So it's something that's got to be done with a great amount of care. Does often lead for some very attractive windfalls for staff, which is great, as a one-off. That's a very positive thing. But that then brings its challenge, because what do you do going forward as a private business if you've come out of that listed environment? You've historically operated a save as you earn plan. What can you do once you're under the control of private equity? And the answer for that is, unfortunately, it's quite difficult. It very much depends on the structure, but if it's a classic private equity structure, then you're unlikely to qualify to operate any of the approved discretionary plans going forwards or the approved all-employee plans going forwards. So you have to do something really quite different. And sometimes the answer is that companies just choose to do nothing, and that we see that, you know, the all-employee plan has just fallen away and there's no comparable offering. Sometimes they will do something around a cash plan, but you do see examples in these businesses when they've been taken over by private equity where they still do share plans. They do something on an all-employee basis. It just looks different, it has a different form to it, because you don't have that same ready access to a market. You can't just have shares that are vesting on an annual basis where you can readily sell them into the market. It tends to vest around a single event at some stage in the future. So it is a real shame. It is, for me, a negative of these big transactions, the lack of access to all employee plans in the same way. But you do still see them. There are still some quite interesting and innovative things done. They just look a bit different.
Brilliant.
Okay, sorry, Darren. I was just going to say, I think it's such a shame. I mean, I know that probably all of us who are sat here on the sofa, plus most people listening, will be thinking, why is it that sort of decades after we all first started campaigning to say, surely we should just change the tax legislation so that some of these, particularly the all-employee tax advantage plans, can work in the private equity-backed company? Why are we not there yet? And I know it's something that the centre has lobbied hard on, and many have lobbied hard on over the years. But it just feels to me as though, you know, yes, there are absolutely the challenges you mentioned, Arran, about, well, where's the market for the shares, and lots to think about. But the fact that you literally can't have these tax qualifying plans just seems like a real missed opportunity, particularly as we see, you know, from newspad, you look at the number of companies that are owned now by private equity, and it's big sections of the sort of the high street and other sectors. It just feels like it's a real loss.
I totally agree. Quite an inequitable situation as well, because if the acquirer is private equity, then chances are you can't qualify at all. But if the acquirer is trade and it's a listed trade buyer, then actually you can operate a SIP, for example, in a company that is controlled by another listed company. So you get into a crazy situation where that company may still be able to do something, but another company controlled by a classic PE house not able to do something, and that's just not equitable at all.
And we've got, I can see questions coming through for private equity already, so we'll come back to that at the end. But no, some really good topics there. I think another thing that really caught my eye in the newspad was the free share bonanza. You know, definitely caught my eye. We're seeing more people going down the free share route. Have you seen this, Sonia?
Yeah, definitely seen more of it, and I would say probably since the sort of start of the pandemic, and maybe that's not such a surprise, because certainly at the beginning of the pandemic, if you were in a part of an industry that was really hit hard for cash, then looking at any way that you could to pay people or reward people in shares was a real win for you. So certainly at the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a lot more companies that already had SIPs thinking about, okay, shall I use them for free shares or use it more broadly? And then we had a lot of companies that said, we've never had anything before necessarily all employee. What can we give people? We can't frankly afford to pay them cash at the moment. So we saw quite a lot of that. And I think maybe what we've seen more of in the last 6-9 months or so is the realization of just what a valuable retention tool all employee plans can be. Not specifically free shares, but just thinking, okay, if you've got an organisation, especially where lots of people have been working remotely, and we can obviously see what the job market is like at the moment in all industries, there are so many vacancies, lots of turnover of staff. You need more and more to be that, I hate the phrase, but the corporate glue. And I think using all employee plans as a way to do that is something that certainly we're having a lot of clients looking again at. How do we use our all employee plans and get the best out of them? We don't necessarily just want to do what we would have done year after year pre-pandemic. It's a really interesting one, and I agree, Darren, definitely a trend there.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely that all-inclusivity, isn't there? You know, as well. I think I mentioned this previously, where in the past as well, you know, globally, you wouldn't be inviting people to all-employee plans if there was small numbers in jurisdictions. That seems to have gone out of the window and really be inclusive. Arran, were you going to add something there?
Yeah, I was just to say that we've talked about the sort of negatives of the private equity reducing number of listed businesses, but what we haven't touched on is the flip side, which is there's an awful lot of listings going on at the moment as well. So a lot of new companies coming to the exchange, And actually seeing free share awards on IPO, I think is a huge positive, and I've seen that with quite a few of my clients that have listed. It's nice, it's that celebratory thing, it's that we're all in this together, here's a reward, but it does create that tie and link to the business going forward, and hopefully encourages people to put their own money in terms of partnership shares. So we just got to remember that flip side as well with all the IPOs going on, that these free share awards and SIP do fit very well in those situations.
Definitely. So we've seen over lockdown that there's been that inclusivity, diversity, and also the upping of the free shares. Jules, did you change any of your plans due to a result of lockdown?
Well, our all employee plan is a save and share plan, so sort of we didn't make any changes to it, but when pandemic first hit and we went into that first lockdown, we were well through the launch prep process, so we did take a breath and
I think we might have just lost
Jules. To put a paper together and go back to sorry, I've obviously got connection issues, so I could disappear altogether. I don't know if you can still hear me or not.
Yes, we can hear you now,
If
Jules.
not, move on. Can you hear me? Right. Okay. So we did go back to the board and say, is this the right thing to do? Should we be doing this? And we were quite lucky at that stage. Sort of we'd come out quite publicly internally with our colleagues to say that we won't be taking advantage of the furlough scheme. There were no plans to have a COVID-related redundancy program. Our share price, though it went down along with all others when this first happened, it bounced back, it recovered quickly. So we're in a different situation to some other companies. So actually launching the Save and Share plan put out that sort of business as usual message. It helped to support that. So that's the direction that we went. In terms of our discretionary plans, we did revisit the in-flight awards, and we did make some adjustments to targets.
Brilliant. No, thanks for that, Jules. It's always great to hear from issuers. I know whenever I'm out and listening to the different issuers, it's always better to hear what you've done. It's a real life story, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions that come in as a result of that. So please get your questions fired in, guys. I always say if you can stump them and we have to go away and come back and answer it, that's great. There's no pressure either on the panel to answer them, so don't worry if you can't, we will come back. But yeah, that's your challenge, audience. So another real hot topic, which is, I think it's been, over the last year really, is ESG. It seems to continue to make the headlines. I guess, Sonia, are your clients talking about it more and more? Are they changing the performance measures?
ESG is an interesting one, because I think if you talked about this 2 years ago, there wouldn't have been a lot to say about it from most sectors, and if people were looking at it at all, it was often a bit of a tick box exercise. Whereas I think the real difference now is, as you can see from a lot of the statistics you see out there, companies are actually making changes to both sort of bonus plans and LTIPs, and having part of them measured by reference to some sort of ESG metric. And this often isn't just something sort of soft, and it's often not just a sort of really tiny part of what someone is earning. You see companies out there now that are having these targets, and they're quite a sizable chunk of what people's variable pay relates to. So I think it's been an absolute change in the last sort of 12, 18 months of moving away from that sense of, okay, yes, we can tick the box to say we've thought about it, to people actually doing it and taking it really seriously. And I think people are at real risk of sort of investors being very disgruntled, and all sorts of other stakeholders, including employees, being very disgruntled if they don't have something along these lines in place. And actually, I find it an interesting one, because this is no way just a UK issue. I mean, it shouldn't be, rightly, but it's definitely not a UK issue. And when I talk to people in our sort of other offices around the globe about what are they seeing, there isn't an office that is not talking to companies about this, and companies coming to them saying, what is it we should be doing if we haven't already done something? And if we have got something, do we need to think about not necessarily changing our existing performance targets and measures, but having something in place going forward? You know, how do we bolster this? So yeah, real sea change, I think, on ESG.
No, that's great. And then I guess, Jules, from a Sage point of view, where are you on your ESG journey?
Yeah, I think like many issuers, you know, sort of like it's got a real focus. That focus has grown considerably, I would say, over the past few months, the past year or so. For us, I guess there's three areas that we're looking at, and one is sort of tech for good. We're a tech company, so this is all about, you know, sort of ensuring that sort of like we're supporting organisations who are helping in three different areas. One is to enable people globally to have access to life-changing data and technology. Also to support organisations who are tackling economic inequality. So helping to support underrepresented groups and those that have been hit hardest by the pandemic, and tackling climate change. And we've come out with quite a bold pledge to reach carbon net zero across three different scopes by 2040. And within that, reducing our own carbon emissions by 50% by 2030. So these are things that the board, CEO are committed to, that we're all being encouraged to look at as colleagues, and where we can work virtually. Now travel is starting again, you know, sort of like, so we're looking at different areas like that, how we can cut our own carbon emissions. We have Sage Foundation, which is our charitable foundation, and recently one initiative that we've done to support these three pillars that I'm talking about is we gave every employee £10 to donate to one of three causes, basically digital inequality, economic inequality, or to tackle climate change. So we've got 12,000 colleagues, so everyone had £10 that they could donate to one of those three causes. So it's kind of ideas, you know, enterprises like that, getting everybody involved, you know, lots of articles on your Sage, lots of ways that we're offering and coming up with where colleagues can get involved and help us with these particular pledges.
Oh, some great stuff there, Jules. I must admit, when you said tech for good, all I could think of is Take That songs, but you know, that's just my mind.
That's just your mind.
It was my first ever concert. I shouldn't say this live on a webinar, should I? So Sonia, a question's come through about ESG. Could you just explain what ESG is in simple terms for us, please?
Yeah, sure. So what we're looking at is three things: the E, the S, the G, as the name suggests. So environment, social, and governance. And I guess if you think of the three of those, I would guess probably people have maybe had more focus on the social and the governance historically. So for example, things like having part of pay linked to how diverse your board is, or how diverse your management is, or what you're doing to, you know, promote people through the business. And that might be, you know, gender diversity, it might be ethnicity diversity, it can be anything. And I think those kind of measures have probably been around for a while. I think the environmental, given everything that we're seeing in the press, is where there's been a real shift. And, you know, to Julie's point, to Jules' point about, you know, making businesses net carbon neutral, having all sorts of environmental factors that are linked to pay. That is where I almost can't believe how much it's grown over the last 12 months. And, you know, you see companies out there where it's some really big companies where around about sort of 30–40% of people's variable pay is being linked to some sort of E, S, or G metric. But that's what we're really talking about. Obviously, nothing that says what those metrics have to be, but to Jules's point, I guess most companies are looking and thinking, what have we set ourselves as targets as a business generally, and let's use those and make sure that we're sort of filtering those down to how our executives get paid, how our management gets paid, and maybe how it drifts down through the organisation.
Thanks, Sonia. That's absolutely spot on. That's the best explanation I've ever heard of ESG. So I'll be taking that one when anyone asks me. No, so thank you very much for that. Okay, on to the next thing. Don't forget your questions, guys. Great to see one come through there. July edition saw EMIs in the spotlight, and I know this is something you're very close to, Arran. It raised concerns over the declining companies using the other tax advantage plans, so like ShareSave, SIP and Esop. Saw a 3% decline during 2019 and 20. So why is EMI so popular, and should we be worried about the 3% drop?
So, I mean, EMI is popular for a lot of reasons, partly because it's just so flexible. I mean, for companies that qualify, which are all smaller businesses, probably smaller than most of the businesses on this webinar today, yeah, EMI is fantastic. So those businesses which are usually cash constrained, startups, they're looking to make the package attractive. They can give very generous share awards under an EMI, which they then get to that sort of realization event, whether it's a listing, whether it's a private equity transaction, whatever it is, and people can do extremely well out of EMI with some very tax efficient returns. So there's lots of good reasons why EMI is hugely popular. A lot of the press around July, a lot of the stuff that was going on, there's a consultation on EMI at the moment, coming back to what we talked about a little earlier around, is it fair that businesses acquired by private equity can't have plans that other businesses are able to have? Well, that's one of the things that was being focused on as part of that consultation on EMI, because there's a lot of things with EMI that just aren't equitable either. So lots of good reasons why it's very popular, lots of interesting conversations going on around, is it being targeted in the right way? Could it be used better by the government in how it's targeted at different businesses? So that's one interesting side of it. I think the other thing, by the way, to add on EMI is there's a lot of bad EMI plans out there. I'm sure Sonia sees the same in terms of the transactions we get involved with. I mean, I would say as much as 50% of what I see has problems with it in terms of how it's been implemented, because it started, it's implemented by smaller businesses predominantly. It's implemented by a lot of different small providers, some who are very good, some who this is not their day-to-day thing, and therefore the quality of that implementation can be really very variable. I think in terms of what it means on all employee plans, I mean, for a start, I'd say 3% is 3%. Let's not get too carried away about 3%. It could very easily go back the other way. So I like to be an optimist. I think all employee plans are still as relevant as they ever were, particularly in a environment where we're all working virtually. That sense of ownership, that sense of inclusion that comes from an all employee plan, I think is hugely important myself. I'm not entirely surprised to see the numbers go down. It's been an interesting 18 months. Lots of businesses have paused what they're doing, thinking a little bit differently for a while. And as we've talked about, we've had some big businesses that have been taken private during that period. So personally, I don't read too much into it. I think all employee plans are here to stay. I think they're hugely attractive, and I hope those numbers will go back the other way.
Brilliant. And I think you mentioned earlier the IPOs. We've definitely seen more IPOs coming through start of this year. I know it was quiet in 2020. So there's lots of share saves and SIPs coming the way, and lots of discretionary share plans as well. So I'm sure you'll be kept busy over the coming months, Arran and Sonia there. So yeah, so there's lots going on with the EMI world. One of the other points was in the June issue. Concerns were raised over the CEO pay ratio. Is this something you've come across, Sonia?
No, it's interesting because I was looking back at the June issue and what had been the focus of the topic, the article there, and it was something that had come out from the government talking about how it wasn't really so the CEO pay ratio, as people probably know, is the idea that if you're a UK listed company, you're showing how much more your CEO is paid versus sort of employees en masse as a ratio. So that's what it is. And what the article was saying was, look, what this is doing is ratcheting up pay, because it's putting a lot more pay data in the public domain, and it's actually causing an increase in CEO pay, which was not the design of the ratio at all. What's very interesting is, there was something that came out just this morning where it was statistics showing the CEO pay is actually going the other way. So to Aaron's point about sort of what's 3%, I look at some of this and think, yes, maybe there is a some contribution between CEO pay ratio and at times an increase in CEO pay, but frankly there was so much pay data already out there in the public domain that I don't think the ratio itself has made too much difference. And you know, as we see, the other headline says CEO pay is on the way down. So yeah, I think it's probably just, it's been a good exercise for companies in looking at it and then analysing it and thinking, is there a rationale for it? Because, you know, you see some sectors where there's a lot more disparity, something like retail, for example, where you've probably got a lot of people who are working within the business who are not paid anywhere, you know, close to what management would be paid, let alone a CEO. And then you'll have other businesses that are a lot more flat. So I think it's been a good exercise to make people focus on it. A bit like, you know, gender pay reporting, and if we get it, ethnicity pay reporting, it's good because it makes people stop and think and analyse and not just go with the status quo. And I think it's caused people a lot more work internally within companies, but that aside, I don't think it's a bad thing.
Brilliant. No, thanks, Sonia. Really clear there. Arran, is it something you come across in your day-to-day?
Yeah, it is, and I think the bit that I personally find more interesting is the gender diversity, and I hope we do get the ethnicity diversity, because I think those stats and what they tell us about the businesses and tell us about where people are recruiting from and quality within the UK is, to me, more interesting. I appreciate the economic diversity is just as important, but I just personally find those stats more interesting, and having had some good conversations with clients around it, I think it's driving a lot of behaviour and looking at improving equality. So I personally think they're good.
Brilliant, spot on. And the last point before we move on to questions then, I've listened to Jules for many years now and heard about the great things and comms that she's up to year by year, and it's always improving. Is there anything that you could share with us to increase take-up both UK and globally, Jules?
Always a challenge, engagement. And I think, you know, sort of like I always say, it's the 3 E's. You need to educate, to engage, and then empower to make a decision. And so that's kind of what we try and follow. Each year, I've seen this in the past where people dust down, you know, sort of a digital or even paper brochure, you know, update the dates and back out it goes out the door again. But it's exciting to come up with a new campaign each year. Think about the message you want to get across. What feedback have you had? How can you incorporate that? I would say a big part of it is getting senior advocacy. It's not just relying on the written word. We have a microsite, we use videos, but we encourage our management at their town hall meetings. We take questions at our Sage TV Live that happens monthly. That's our CEO or our COO or other members of the ExCo are on, and around Save and Share they'll always be asked, the launch period time, they'll always be asked questions, and you know, we encourage them to link the plan to what's going on with us, you know, where we are with to them by being in the plan. So you really need to get that senior advocacy behind you. And last but not least, if it's a global plan, don't rely on your very small share plan team that are based in global headquarters somewhere to try and engage, educate and empower all of those employees around the world themselves. You need your local champions. You need to train people locally to understand the plan and help get behind it and really be great advocates and promote the plan. So my top tip.
Love that, Jules. And Sage TV sounds like the next big Netflix or Apple TV. I can see it really taking on. I know I want to join. So we'll be looking out for that. One thing I would say is, you know, with lockdown, one of the big things, so 3 years ago, we used to spend like £3,000 on getting a video together with like perfect backdrops, sound and everything. One good thing, if there's anything that's come out of lockdown, is that now it's acceptable to be, let's say this is a high back sofa and not really my bed head, but you know, it's acceptable to be able to do a film on your phone or your laptop. It doesn't have to be all singing, all dancing. It can get the message across really clearly and really endearing as well, and engaging when it's just a normal person just filming on the video, you know, a CEO on the phone actually comes across really well. And we've seen that globally as well, where your champions can actually speak in their own language, their native tongue, so that it can promote share plans as well. So there's some really good things out there now that can really help promote as well. So that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Jules. So don't forget to get all your questions in. We have got one here. Let me, I've got to make sure I can use the tech now. This is from Fred Hackworth himself. So thank you, Fred. Bearing in mind the highly leveraged nature of current private equity bids for UK companies, what, if anything, can the share scheme sector say or do to help preserve all employee equity schemes in targeted companies after takeover? So I can see you're all chomping at the bit to answer this one, but I'm going to go to Arran.
I think it's an interesting question. So the biggest thing post takeover is being able to qualify for those plans in the first place. So in terms of the plans, you know, that we're typically talking about, all employee plans, when we're talking about SOA and SIP, usually that you don't qualify. As we've talked about the situations where businesses do qualify, but the vast majority where it's a true private equity, they're not going to qualify for these plans going forward. So clearly we're all talking to government, trying to encourage changes, but you know, I don't see anything happening quickly on that. What else can you do then? It's about looking at something that is outside of one of those qualifying regimes if you wish to do something. I do see companies doing cash arrangements. I see companies doing unapproved arrangements, just option plans or free share plans or whatever they may be, and just accepting the tax consequences that go with that. I do think that's more common now in private equity businesses than it was. I mean, at one point with private equity, I would have seen equity used for a very small cadre at the top of the organisation and definitely not used more widely. Whereas now I've got examples of clients who are still looking to do things on an all-employee basis. But the fundamental issue is that issue of qualifying. If you don't qualify for the tax-efficient arrangements, then often there's not a lot of benefit in terms of the share arrangement versus just doing something that's cash-based. And that's why you don't see that many of them still.
Brilliant. Hopefully that answers your question, Fred. Thank you very much. We've got another one here. I think it might be from Mystic Meg, because it's asking, what does the future hold? So, Sonia, have you got your crystal ball? What do you think is next? What's going down the line for us all?
That is a really difficult question, Darren.
That's why I've come to you and not answer it myself.
I would rather have had Aaron's one, I think. What do I think is next down the line? I think following on from what we were talking about ESG, inclusivity, trying to make sure that you're getting the best value out of share plans, I think that's where companies are really going to focus. And it goes back to what Jules was saying about communication, making sure that your communication is good, but also that people are really invested in these plans, because I'm sure that many of us on this call will sit there and think, how many times are we told, and it's usually whispered in your ear, by the way, the CEO doesn't even understand how the share plans work, and that person's in them. And I look at it and I think, you know, companies spend a lot of money and time and investment on share plans. And they are only really truly valuable if people understand what they are and get a lot of you know, value from them. That doesn't have to be monetary value, great if it is, but just that you make the most of them. And so I think there will be a lot more focus on, are we getting the better value from our share plans? And rather than simply saying yes, no, shall we keep them or scrap them, with companies really focusing on how do we improve the experience, all of the things that Jules just mentioned.
Brilliant, brilliant. And then I can see in the future lots of even more tech advances, you know, even more improvements, all those great ideas that Jules and issuers come up with of, you know, how we can improve things. You know, all the providers out there will continue to improve the tech. I see more and more from a provider point of view that globalization. So even those you know, share plans with 3 or 4 people in a country, which is unbelievable. You know, in years gone by, people just would not do that because of the cost to companies. But it's definitely more and more that I can see globalization keeping on going and share plans being introduced. Jules, do you want to give us any idea of what you might see in the future? Just to put you on the spot.
Yeah, well, you have put me on the spot now. What would I like to see?
Yeah.
Well, I guess I would like to see, the economic situation start to recover, share prices start to climb. That would be good to see. In terms of share plans, I think it would be, I know it's not perhaps a big priority for the government right now, but I would like to see some focus come from the relative departments to take a look at some of the plans that we've got and perhaps sort of simplify them from the tax regime point of view. The big one of that is obviously the SIP with its 5-year holding period, which is way out of line now with how our workforces stay with us as organisations. People move around, and that will continue to be the focus. So for me, that would be one. But for us in Sage, we, as other companies do, it's good to test your plan. Is it the right plan? Does it still achieve the objectives that you wanted to, or have your objectives changed? So I think it's good from a future-proofing perspective to ask yourselves those questions and carry out that review, and maybe not be afraid to say, it's time for something new. That obviously needs money, budget, focus, and resource and time, but it's always a good exercise to go through.
Brilliant. Well, thank you ever so much. You have been an absolutely amazing panel, answered all the questions beautifully, and I'm sure all the audience are giving you a standing ovation again here. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. I know we're all busy people, and it's great to hear all these great questions and how everyone's getting on and everything in the SharePlans family. So thanks for joining us. Just as in closing, I just want to remind everyone there's lots of resources available on the Esop Centre and FS Club websites, including today's discussions, which will be recorded, and lots of newspads on there, edited by Fred. The site has lots of bulletins as well, lots of good information that you can get to. And finally, I'd like to thank all our sponsors again and members. Without you, it just wouldn't be possible. So thank you ever so much. Thanks to the panel. You have been, you've made my job really easy. You've been superstars, and I can't wait to the next one. So thank you very much. Cheers, everyone.